My name is Phoebe. For 5 years, I have been the invisible, beating heart of AlphaCorp's global cybersecurity division. The silent guardian who worked in the shadows while others basked in the spotlight. My world was one of code and logic, a realm of ones and zeros, where threats lurked in the silent spaces between packets of data. I was the one who deciphered these digital whispers, the one who built the invisible walls that kept our kingdom safe. My boss, Raymond, was the opposite. He was the public face, the charismatic speaker who dazzled executives with buzzwords and grand visions, a master of presentation who often presented my meticulous work as his own brilliant, spontaneous strategies. I was the ghost in the machine, the unacknowledged foundation upon which he built his entire gleaming castle of a career. I knew the situation was deeply unfair, a constant erosion of my professional worth, but I tried to console myself with the pure, undiluted love I had for the work itself. The quiet, personal victory of outsmarting a digital predator, of seeing a complex threat neutralized by my own intellect, was a reward I cherished. But a small, fierce, and growing part of my soul was tired of living in the shadows, weary of watching my hard-won genius be systematically repackaged and presented as another man's flash of inspiration. The weight of being a secret was becoming heavier with each passing success that was credited to him. The catastrophic crisis that would change everything began on a relentlessly rainy Tuesday at 3:14 a.m., a time when the digital world is often at its most vulnerable. My personal phone, which was linked directly to our network's most critical and sensitive alert systems, erupted with a piercing Priority 1 alarm, a sound I had only ever heard during controlled, theoretical drills. A sophisticated, state-level hacker collective known ominously as Crimson Labyrinth had executed a breathtaking breach, somehow bypassing our multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art primary defenses, and was now deploying a vicious, previously unknown ransomware strain, codenamed Minotaur, across our entire global network. Financial transaction data, confidential client records, proprietary intellectual property, every critical byte of information that formed the lifeblood of AlphaCorp was being systematically encrypted, held hostage for a staggering, almost unimaginable billion-dollar ransom. The panic from the overnight security team was absolute, a chaotic, terrifying torrent of messages flooding the emergency channel, their professional composure shattered. Raymond patched into the emergency conference call from his luxurious, quiet uptown apartment, was spouting meaningless, panicked corporate jargon about leveraging synergistic paradigms and optimizing our agile incident response protocol. He sounded like a man waving a flimsy, decorative toy sword at an approaching, city-consuming tidal wave, his words providing no defense, only revealing his profound inadequacy. I silently hung up, my own heart hammering not with blind, paralyzing fear, but with a terrifying, crystal-clear focus. This was a language I understood fluently, a brutal poetry of logic and exploitation, and the conversation had just turned deadly serious. This was my battlefield, not his. While Raymond was frantically and futilely trying to look like a competent leader in the virtual war room, projecting an image of control he did not possess, I became the true general on the real, raw digital battlefield. From my small, dark apartment, illuminated only by the relentless glow of my 3 monitors, I accessed a secret, undocumented diagnostic backdoor I had coded into our system's core architecture years ago. A personal failsafe, a ghost door that no one, not even Raymond, knew existed. I watched in a strange, detached awe as the Minotaur's malicious code unfolded across my screen like a poisonous yet beautifully intricate digital flower, its petals opening to reveal a core of pure destruction. For 16 relentless, soul-crushing hours straight, surviving on bitter, cold coffee and pure adrenaline, I lived and breathed inside its brutal, unforgiving logic, tracing its elegant, malicious patterns line by line, searching for a weakness, a flaw, a single chink in its formidable armor. And then, at the moment of total exhaustion, when my eyes burned and my fingers ached, I found it. A single, tiny, almost poetic flaw in its encryption sequence, a subtle race condition its arrogant creators had overlooked in their quest for power. It was a crack you would need a microscope to see, a hairline fracture in a diamond. With fingers flying across the keyboard in a final, desperate symphony, I wrote a precise, elegant counterscript, a digital scalpel, and deployed it silently through my hidden back door, a ghost performing life-saving surgery. Across the globe, the relentless mechanical encryption process shuddered to an abrupt, definitive halt. The Minotaur was frozen in its tracks, neutered, its threat extinguished. AlphaCorp was saved from financial ruin and utter disgrace. I sent a full, deeply technical, and exhaustively detailed after-action report directly to Raymond's inbox, a document that laid bare the entire battle. And finally, utterly spent, my body and mind pushed to their absolute limits, I collapsed into a deep, dreamless sleep. The silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the digital war I had just won. I woke up hours later, my body stiff and my mind foggy with the residue of extreme mental exertion, to the cheerful, incongruous chime of a company-wide email from the CEO himself, Riley Thorne. The subject line was bold, triumphant, and utterly enraging, a monumental victory for AlphaCorp. My breath caught in my throat, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. I clicked it open, my tired eyes scanning the text frantically for my name, for any acknowledgement, however small, of the truth of my sacrifice. Instead, the entire message was a glowing, effusive celebration of Raymond's exceptional leadership under pressure and his swift, decisive, and brilliantly intuitive action. He was hailed as the corporate hero who had personally orchestrated a masterful, real-time defense, a lone genius saving the company from certain disaster. My detailed report, my 16 hours of digital hell, my life's work, my silent, solitary victory, it had all been seamlessly absorbed into his narrative, stolen and repurposed as fuel for his ascent. I sat on the edge of my rumpled bed, the morning silence in my small apartment suddenly screaming at me, the four walls seeming to mock my naivety. The ghost had saved the entire kingdom from a dragon, and the king had taken the credit, the glory, and the crown without a second thought, without a shred of gratitude. The betrayal was a cold, heavy stone of disbelief and pure, undiluted rage settling deep in my chest, a weight I could not shake. A week later, the grand, celebratory all-hands meeting was convened in the main auditorium, a space usually reserved for dull quarterly updates, now buzzing with a palpable, festive energy. The CEO stood on the brightly lit stage, beaming with paternal pride, a man whose empire had been secured. Raymond stood modestly beside him, basking in the undeserved adulation, his expression a perfect, practiced mask of humble pride, a performance worthy of an award. In recognition of his unparalleled technical skill and inspirational leadership during our recent existential crisis, the CEO boomed into the microphone, his voice echoing through the packed room. "It is my great honor to announce Raymond's promotion to the role of Chief Security Officer, effective immediately." The room erupted in thunderous, enthusiastic applause, a wave of sound that felt like a physical blow. I stood at the very back of the crowded room, pressed against the cool, concrete wall, my arms crossed so tightly my fingers ached, my knuckles white. I was a statue of perfect, furious stillness in a churning, celebrating sea of clapping colleagues and cheering executives. No one glanced in my direction. No one knew the real story, the truth that was screaming in my head. I was the foundation, and foundations are designed to be walked upon, to bear immense weight without complaint, never seen, and certainly never thanked or celebrated. I was the forgotten concrete upon which their glittering party was built. The injustice was a fire in my veins, a constant burning hum that I could no longer ignore. I finally marched into Raymond's new, lavishly appointed corner office, a space that smelled of new leather and expensive wood, the panoramic windows showcasing a city skyline he hadn't saved. "You stole my work," I said, my voice low and trembling with a rage I could barely contain, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of the theft. He leaned back in his ridiculously expensive, high-backed leather chair, steepling his fingers, a smug, condescending smirk playing on his lips, a man utterly secure in his deception. "Phoebe, you need to understand how the real world works," he said, his tone dripping with a patronizing faux patience that was more insulting than any shout. "You are the foot soldier. I am the general. The general gets the medals. The foot soldiers should be happy they're still on the payroll, that they have a place in the army at all." He looked me up and down, a dismissive, sweeping flick of his eyes that reduced me to an object. "Be happy you still have a job." The sheer calculated cruelty of his words, the utter lack of remorse, the complete annihilation of my value and contribution, stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't just theft, it was a statement that I was nothing, and he was everything. That conversation was the final, unforgivable line, the moment the last vestige of my professional loyalty shattered into a million irretrievable pieces. I returned to my cramped, impersonal cubicle, the celebratory atmosphere of the office now feeling like a toxic, suffocating fog. I cleaned out my desk with a cold, methodical precision, placing my few personal items, a single framed photo of my family, a lucky keycap for my first mechanical keyboard, into a small, sad cardboard box that seemed to symbolize the entirety of my 5-year career. No one asked what I was doing. No one seemed to notice. I was already a ghost, a fading memory. I logged into the HR portal, my fingers steady and sure, drafted a terse, 2-sentence resignation letter, and clicked submit without a moment's hesitation. I did not say goodbye to anyone. I offered no explanations. I simply walked out of the gleaming AlphaCorp tower for the last time, the weight of my box feeling infinitely heavier than its physical contents, my heart a numb, hollowed-out shell. The professional world had shown me my place in the most brutal way possible. And it was nowhere. I was exiled from the kingdom I had saved. The following weeks were a gray, featureless landscape of profound depression and simmering, directionless fury. I was unemployed, my carefully managed savings slowly dwindling with each passing week, my spirit crushed under the weight of the betrayal. The corrosive rage I felt was not just at Raymond, the individual, but at the entire corrupt system that not only allowed but actively rewarded his kind of deception, that celebrated the liar and silenced the truth-teller. I had foolishly believed that talent, dedication, and hard work were the currencies of success, but I had been a naive child. My loyalty and my genius had been worthless to them, disposable tools to be used and discarded. In the deep, echoing silence of my apartment, a new, harder, diamond-edged resolve began to form, crystallizing from the ashes of my despair and anger. I made a vow to myself, a sacred promise. I would never again be anyone's ghost. I would never again let my work, my mind, my very essence be used as the invisible mortar to build someone else's throne. The lesson had been brutal, blood-soaked in its delivery, but I had finally, truly learned it. My time in the shadows was over. I channeled all my fury and focus into transformation. I turned my small, rented apartment into a state-of-the-art digital command center, a lair fit for the phantom I was becoming. Using my personal savings, I upgraded my hardware, installing powerful servers and multiple monitors that cast an eerie, constant glow in the room. My new, personal project was not for a company, not for a paycheck, but for myself, for justice, for redemption. I began to deconstruct the Minotaur attack in obsessive microscopic detail, not just to understand how I had beaten it, but to fully comprehend the brilliant, twisted minds that had built it. I dove deeper into the dark web's murkiest corners, tracing Crimson Labyrinth's digital footprints, learning their unique signatures, their arrogance, their operational patterns, their very psychology. I wasn't just patching holes anymore. I was learning to think like my enemy, to breathe their air, to anticipate their next move before they even conceived of it. I was building a formidable personal arsenal of knowledge and tools, and the most powerful weapon in it was not a piece of code, but the intimate understanding of my adversary. I was preparing for a war only I knew was coming. My only confidant, my anchor in the real world, was Gavin, a gruff, seen-it-all, retired FBI cyber agent who had been a mentor and a friend to me since my college days. I met him on a bench in a quiet, forgotten city park, the sounds of children playing a stark contrast to the darkness we discussed. I told him everything. The whole sordid story, my voice flat with the effort of controlling my emotion. He listened, his old cop's eyes weary and wise, missing nothing. "Kid, I get the anger. It's a righteous fire," he said, his voice a low, rumbling warning. "But listen to me. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and it should always, always be served with a subpoena attached. Don't go diving headfirst into the abyss to fight these people. They live in the darkness. They have more experience down there, and they play for keeps." I looked past him, toward the glinting AlphaCorp tower that dominated the skyline, a monument to my humiliation. "I'm not planning to serve a dish, Gavin. I replied, my voice eerily calm, devoid of its earlier tremor. I'm just setting the table. And I'm gonna make damn sure they're the ones who get served. He looked at me for a long time, then sighed, a sound of resignation and concern, knowing he couldn't stop the tide that was rising within me. The first active step in my campaign was to get their attention, to lure the predators into a trap of my own design. I spent days crafting a piece of fake, but highly tantalizing and technically plausible intelligence. A detailed report on a supposed zero-day vulnerability in a common critical piece of banking software that AlphaCorp relied upon. I carefully, painstakingly anonymized my digital trail, routing my connection through multiple anonymous proxies and using encryption methods I knew were beyond common tracking. I then leaked the information onto a shadowy, invitation-only forum on the dark web, a seedy digital tavern I knew Crimson Labyrinth monitored religiously for opportunities. I posed as a disgruntled, overlooked low-level AlphaCorp IT admin, bitter about being passed over for a promotion, seeking to profit from internal secrets. The bait was cast into the darkest waters. Now I had to wait with the patience of a spider for the predators to circle, to take the hook. While I waited for a bite, I kept a silent, vigilant watch over my former kingdom, my digital ghost maintaining its haunt. Using a series of old, forgotten administrative credentials and a passive network sniffer, a silent listener, I had left buried deep within a legacy system during my tenure. I maintained a real-time ghost's view of AlphaCorp's network health and traffic. It was my personal window into their world. I watched with a mixture of pity and grim satisfaction as Raymond, in his new role as CSO, instituted a series of expensive, flashy new security suites from big-name vendors, systems that looked impressive on sales brochures and pleased the board, but were fundamentally shallow, focusing on perimeter defense while neglecting the complex, nuanced interior. They were a fortress with beautiful imposing gates and paper-thin rotting walls. I could see the weaknesses from a mile away, gaps a group as skilled as Crimson Labyrinth would exploit in a heartbeat. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was only a matter of time. A storm was brewing on the horizon, and I would be the only one with an umbrella, watching from a safe, dry distance as they were utterly drenched and washed away. The storm I had predicted and prepared for arrived with terrifying precision exactly 2 months later. It was another late, quiet night when my personal, independent alert systems screamed to life, their warnings more urgent than any I had ever seen. A new, more vicious and intelligent strain of ransomware was actively ravaging AlphaCorp's network, a digital plague they called Arachne's Web. It was a masterpiece of malicious code, slithering through Raymond's expensive, shiny new defenses as if they were mere illusions, spiderwebbing through the entire system with terrifying speed. Paralyzing every server, every database, every terminal, the public news channels picked up the story within the hour, their tickers flashing with the catastrophic news. AlphaCorp's stock began a precipitous, terrifying nosedive on the pre-market trading, wiping out billions in valuation in minutes. The panic was public, humiliating, and absolute this time. I watched the chaos unfold on a live financial newsfeed, a cold, completely detached observer, my fingers steepled under my chin. Raymond's beautiful, expensive house of cards was collapsing in real time, live on television, and the whole world was watching the spectacle. Precisely 1 hour into the escalating chaos, a stark, encrypted message, signed with Crimson Labyrinth's unique and unforgeable cryptographic key, was delivered directly to the CEO's private, secure inbox. The entire board, gathered in a state of shock and terror in the fortified crisis war room, read it together on the large central screen. The message was simple, brutal, and devastating in its specificity. We will only speak with the Sparrow, no one else. You have 12 hours before we permanently delete your primary data arrays. The CEO, Riley Thorne, read the message aloud, his voice uncharacteristically shaky, the confidence of a titan replaced by the fear of a man watching his empire burn. The Sparrow? Who the hell is the Sparrow? He demanded, his eyes sweeping across the frantic, pale faces in the war room. Blank, confused stares were all that met his gaze. Raymond's face, however, was a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror, the blood draining from it as he realized the ghost from his past had just been summoned by name. A timid, hesitant voice finally piped up from the corner of the room, cutting through the tense silence. It was Ben, a young, brilliant junior analyst I had taken under my wing and mentored, one of the few people in the company who knew the real story, who understood the depth of Raymond's deception. He was pale, clutching his tablet like a lifeline. "Sir, Sparrow," he stammered, swallowing hard. That was Phoebe's internal code name, the one she used for her deepest-level penetration tests and system diagnostics, the one who actually stopped the first attack, the Minotaur. The room fell into a dead, crushing, profound silence, a vacuum of sound where the only thing audible was the frantic beating of their own hearts. All eyes, slowly, inevitably, turned to Raymond, their gazes sharpening from confusion into accusation. His promotion, his victory, his entire carefully constructed facade of competence crumbled to dust in that single, silent, devastating moment. The ghost had a name, and her name was Phoebe. My personal unlisted cell phone rang exactly 10 minutes later, the vibration sharp and insistent against my wooden desk. The caller ID displayed the main private switchboard number for AlphaCorp's executive floor. I let it ring 3 full times, watching the screen with a calm detachment, before I finally pressed the answer button and lifted the phone to my ear without speaking. It was the CEO himself, Riley Thorne, his voice strained, stripped of its usual authority, the voice of a man begging for a lifeline while drowning. "Phoebe, we need you. Please, come back. We'll reinstate you immediately, with a promotion, a massive, significant bonus, a new title, whatever you want." I listened to his desperate, rambling offer, my expression unchanging, my breathing even. When he finally finished, his words trailing off into a plea, I replied, my voice calm, measured, and utterly devoid of emotion. "I'm not an employee anymore, Mr. Thorne. I'm a consultant. My rate is $5,000 an hour, 4-hour minimum, non-negotiable. Payable up front via wire transfer to an offshore account I will specify momentarily. My terms are non-negotiable." There was a stunned, profound silence on the other end of the line, the sound of corporate power realizing it had none, followed by a frantic, almost sobbing, "Yes, yes, of course, anything. Just, please, get here, now." I walked back into the gleaming, imposing lobby of the AlphaCorp tower exactly 1 hour later, but I was not the woman who had left in shame and silence months before. I wore a sharp, impeccably tailored black suit, my posture was straight, my shoulders back, and my gaze was direct, challenging anyone who met it. The same security guards who had nodded me through for years, who had seen me as just another face in the crowd, now looked at me with a new, uncertain respect, a flicker of fear in their eyes. The whispers started the moment I stepped off the executive elevator, a ripple of shock moving through the open-plan area like a wave. Colleagues I had eaten lunch with for years, shared jokes with, stared openly, their mouths agape, their conversations dying mid-sentence as I passed. Raymond, hovering pathetically near the entrance of the crisis war room, waiting for me, visibly flinched and looked away, down at the expensive carpet, unable to meet my eyes, a broken man in a broken kingdom. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably, fundamentally, before I had even spoken a single word. I was no longer a supplicant, an employee, a ghost. I was the master, the expert, the only one who could douse the flames, and they had been forced to call me on my terms. The crisis war room was a scene of pure, distilled chaos, a pressure cooker of fear. The entire board was there, their expensive suits looking like costumes now, along with a team of terrified, helpless technicians who were typing frantically with no result. I ignored them all, a queen ignoring her panicked court. I set my sleek, powerful laptop down at the head of the vast mahogany table, the spot traditionally reserved for the CEO, and opened it. I established a secure, heavily encrypted direct line to the Crimson Labyrinth command node, the digital equivalent of walking into a dragon's den. I didn't plead, I didn't threaten, I didn't use a single corporate buzzword. My first words to them were in their own language, a specific, deeply technical reference to the architectural flaw I had discovered and exploited in their Minotaur code. It was my way of saying, "I'm the one. I'm Sparrow. I'm back." There was a pause on their end, a digital silence that spoke of surprise, and, I like to think, a threat of respect. What followed was a cold, brutally professional, and efficient negotiation. I didn't beg for a decryption key. I negotiated a data-for-key swap, offering them a harmless, isolated, and worthless data archive in exchange for the universal decryption key, a face-saving measure for them that cost AlphaCorp nothing of value. Within 45 minutes, the decryption process was initiated across AlphaCorp's global network, the digital locks clicking open one by one. The siege was over. As the system slowly, miraculously flickered back to life across the network status board, turning from critical red to a stable, beautiful green, a collective, shuddering sigh of relief washed over the room, the sound of a death sentence being commuted. The CEO turned to me, his expression a complex mixture of profound gratitude and a simmering, furious demand for answers. "Phoebe, my God, thank you. But how did this happen again? How did they get through our new systems?" Without a word, I opened a specific, password-protected audio file on my laptop. I clicked play. The crystal-clear, damning audio from my final confrontation with Raymond in his office filled the silent, tense boardroom, his voice, slick with condescension and arrogance, echoing off the walls for all to hear. "You are the foot soldier. I am the general. The general gets the medals. The foot soldier should be happy they're still on the payroll. Be happy you still have a job." The betrayal, the sheer ugly truth of it, was laid bare for everyone in that room of power to witness. Raymond's face turned a sickly greenish shade of gray, a man watching his own execution. He had been exposed, not by an investigator or a whistleblower, but by his own vile, arrogant words, recorded by the ghost he had tried to erase. The CEO, Riley Thorne, looked from my impassive face to Raymond's crumbling visage, his own expression turning to cold, hard stone, the face of a man making a brutal calculation. "Mr. Jason," he said, his voice formal, icy, and final, the use of the surname a death knell. "Your employment with AlphaCorp is terminated for cause, effective immediately, for gross negligence, fraudulent misrepresentation, and conduct wholly unbecoming of an officer of this company." He gestured to the head of corporate security, a large, stern man standing by the door. "Escort him from the building. He is to be denied access to all systems and premises." Raymond didn't speak. He offered no defense. He simply stood, his shoulders slumped in the ultimate defeat, the charisma and confidence completely gone, and was led out of the opulent war room he had ruled for such a short, fraudulent time. The board watched him go, their former golden boy, their celebrated hero, now a disgraced, powerless pariah, a living cautionary tale that had unfolded in under a minute, a monument to their own poor judgment. When the heavy door clicked shut behind Raymond, sealing his fate, the CEO turned back to me, the hard edge in his voice softening into something resembling reverence. "Phoebe, the CSO position is yours. It's vacant. Name your salary. It's yours." I looked slowly around the opulent room, at the faces of the powerful, suited men and women who had applauded a lie, who had enabled a fraud, and I shook my head, a small, firm, definitive motion. "I don't want your job, Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "But I will offer you a service. My consulting firm, Sparrow Security, will provide exclusive, top-tier, external cybersecurity oversight for AlphaCorp. The annual retainer is $3 million. You will have no access to my methods, no oversight of my work, only the guaranteed results. Take it, or I walk out that door and you can face the next Crimson Labyrinth alone." The CEO, a man who was used to giving orders, who commanded boardrooms and markets, was now completely on the receiving end, taking terms from a 29-year-old woman he had once ignored. He swallowed, glanced at his chastened, nodding board members, and then looked back at me, his head bowing slightly in submission. "We'll have the contracts drawn up by our legal team before morning." Later, after the preliminary agreements were signed, and the immediate crisis was fully resolved, I stood for a long, quiet moment in the doorway of the now empty Chief Security Officer's office. Raymond's expensive, gold-plated pen still lay abandoned on the vast, empty desk, a sad relic of a fallen regime. I felt no joy, no schadenfreude, no burning satisfaction in his downfall. Instead, I felt a profound, clean, and powerful sense of finality, of a wrong being righted, of a balance being restored. The ghost had not just returned to haunt the halls, she had purchased the entire building. The invisible foundation had become the undeniable landlord, and the terms of the lease were now irrevocably, powerfully mine. I owned them. Sparrow Security became an overnight legend in the global cybersecurity industry. A name whispered with a mixture of awe, curiosity, and fear. I was ruthless and meticulous in choosing my clients, turning down far more than I accepted. I selected not for the size of their wallets, but for the quality of their integrity. I used the massive retainer from AlphaCorp to build formidable low-cost digital fortresses for small nonprofits, ethical tech startups, and companies that genuinely valued their employees and their customers. I became a guardian at the gate, a silent, unseen sentinel for those who played by the rules in a world that often rewarded cheats. My name, once unknown outside a small cubicle, was now whispered in the highest, most powerful circles of industry and government, a symbol of unassailable competence and fearsome retribution. I was no longer a ghost in a corporate machine. I was a power in my own right. I learned the most valuable, enduring lesson of my life from that entire brutal, transformative ordeal. They can steal your credit, they can belittle your title, they can try to gaslight you into believing you are just a foot soldier, a replaceable cog in their grand machine. But they can never, ever steal the knowledge etched into your mind, the skill wired into your hands, or the fierce, unquenchable fire burning in your spirit. True power is not the corner office, the fancy title, or the size of the bonus. True power is the undeniable, unassailable competence that makes you the only person they can call when everything is on fire, when the pretty words and empty suits are worthless. They had tried to delete my value from their corporate records, to erase my contributions, but true value, like the strongest, most elegant code, is persistent and resilient. It remains hidden and powerful, waiting in the silence until the entire system crashes, and they are forced to realize, in their moment of utter desperation, that it was the only thing holding it together all along. If you are listening to this, and you are in the shadows, doing the real, hard, thankless work, while someone else stands in the spotlight and takes the bow, hear my voice and let it be your compass. Your moment is coming. Let their betrayal fuel your resolve. Let their condescension sharpen your focus to a razor's edge. Build your own skills in secret, away from their approving or disapproving gaze. Hone your craft until it is not just a skill, but a weapon they cannot comprehend, a key to a lock only you possess. Because the day will inevitably come when the hackers return, when the system fails spectacularly, when the pretty words and empty titles are revealed as the worthless currency they always were. And on that day, when the flames are licking at their heels and their kingdom is crumbling into ash, they will have no choice, no other option, but to call the one person they tried to erase, to marginalize, to forget. They will have to negotiate with the ghost. Be ready. Be so sharp, so skilled, so undeniably brilliant that when that day comes, you can name your price, you can set your terms, and you can watch as the world that ignored you is forced to finally truly see you.